And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of Doing the Work, the first show on the Back Home Network covering IU women's basketball. I'm your host, Jeff Marlow, and I'm joined today by our guest, Amanda Foster from Inside the Hall and Crimson Cast. And today we are discussing your number 2 ranked Indiana Hoosiers loss in the Big Ten semifinals to number 14 Ohio State, 79-75. This takes the women's record to 27-3 overall. But let's start this show the way we start every show, and that is with our banner moment. And Amanda, in a game that really is not going to have too many banner moments, I'm going to go back to the play that Lily Meister made that I thought might be what got us over the hump. Back in the fourth quarter, she got a putback that I believe took us up to a 70-63 lead, and I kind of felt like that was going to be what got us over the hump, but wasn't meant to be. We're going to get into this a little bit here with Amanda, but it just was not a good half. An excellent first half of basketball was punctuated by an almost equally or worse second half from the Hoosiers. So our banner moment today is always sponsored by Home Field Apparel. Home Field is constantly releasing new schools or updating their products. For schools in their existing line, you're bound to find something for you or anyone in your life that just loves great collegiate gear. They now have over 120 schools in their lineup. So whether you want only IU gear or other college teams or nothing associated with a team, Home Field probably has something for you. Not only do you get quality apparel, but you're supporting an Indiana-based business that has its roots in the Kelley School of Business. Go to homefieldapparel.com, use our promo code HOME, H-O-M-E, to get 15% off your entire first order. That's our promo code HOME for 15% off. Once again, the website is homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. And we're going to swing it around to my guest today, Amanda Foster, for Amanda's analysis and get her initial thoughts about the game.
Oh, boy. I have a lot of thoughts. You touched on it just in the beginning of this. It was a great first half from Indiana. And then the second half, it was like they completely flipped from what they usually do in terms of coming out. And usually the second half is the better one for the Hoosiers. And this time they could not handle Ohio State's press, which they – in the other games this past season, the regular season, when they played against a press, they struggled at times. Like, it wasn't like they knew exactly what they were doing, but they figured it out. And today they just couldn't. And it was turnover after turnover after bad pass all the way across the court that went out of somebody's hands. Like, it was just, there were so many things that Ohio State was doing well in terms of pressuring them. And there was something about this game, about whatever was going on with Indiana, that they just couldn't fix their mentality, it looked like. And as the game kept going on, it kind of didn't really matter what went right for them because Ohio State was just finding all of the momentum throughout the entire second half.
Yeah, and I will say one thing, Amanda, you brought up a good point about the press. And yeah, we were, with Ari and as well, talking in a text set where Indiana had really handled the last 2 years, really, even with Ohio State's pressure. They've struggled with other teams at times. But I made the comment, and obviously it was, from a coaching standpoint, it's just unreal how something like that can snowball. All of a sudden, you get a couple steals, you force a couple turnovers, and the other team just really feels the energy. And then even for a veteran group, I mean, you saw this is about as veteran a group as you could have had out there. They got back on their heels. They looked very tentative against it. They weren't cutting against it. They kind of got the ball in and then kind of stood and helped, throw it. And instead of and a couple times they got the ball to the middle or flashed somebody middle, something positive tended to happen out of it. But I just think it's one of those, and I can't explain it. I've been on both sides of it as a coach, where it just snowballs and you're all of a sudden, now I wouldn't have expected them to give up 24 point lead, but I don't remember getting to 24. The TV kept saying 24. I remember at 49-26. But I might have missed one there. But I would not have expected that. But that's what can happen. And Ohio State has shown when they're healthy. They did this to Tennessee a little bit earlier in the year where it was kind of a close game. And all of a sudden they got the press going and they just really ran them out of the gym in Columbus. So, just kind of your thoughts on, again, go back to the press a little bit and just, some of the things that we saw that, especially some from the veterans who were seemingly making the mistakes.
Yeah, well, and I just wanted to touch on, like you mentioned, I was talking about this during the game, that people might have forgotten how good Ohio State was for the majority of the regular season because they were undefeated until they played Iowa and number 2 in the country. And so it's not like this is a huge surprise on their part. It's a bigger surprise on the part of Indiana. Like you said, for some of the veterans, like I don't know what was going on with Mackenzie Holmes today, but she did not look, from what I could see on the TV, which was not a lot, but she didn't look 100%. And she wasn't driving into the basket like she usually does. And she was fumbling around with the ball. Claymore McNeil was fumbling with the ball, and she had at least a few turnovers, I think, during the game. And it was definitely not what you would expect. And I think for when you see players like Mackenzie and Chloe, and Grace had a pretty good game, but even towards the end, she was struggling a little bit. When the rest of the team sees their leaders and their most experienced players playing like that, I would be shocked if it didn't have some impact on the rest of the team in the way that they played.
Yeah. So let's use that to kind of segue into the things that went as expected. And I think that's going to be in the first half. This team was firing on all cylinders. They were moving the ball. They were hitting shots, and that's kind of what we've come to expect from this team.
Yeah, 100%. It was the way that Indiana basketball was supposed to be played was played in the first half. And I would say for the thing that I expected the most that did happen was Grace Berger coming out and taking charge from the get-go, because she really drove that first quarter, that first half, even for Indiana. She finished with 20 points and 4 rebounds and 6 assists. So she had a relatively good game, and I expected her to, especially after yesterday when she really didn't live up to all of her potential that we know that she can hit. And so that was the biggest thing. And like you said, just everything seemed to be flowing so well in the first half, which is what you have come to expect from this team, because that's what they've done all year. And then unfortunately they just had whatever the second half was, which was the opposite of what should have happened.
Yeah, and it showed up in all facets, Amanda. We had, and I don't want to try and get too deep into the numbers here, obviously, but we committed 13 turnovers in the second half. We shot 28%. I mean, about the only place we really were solid was at the free throw line. And that's kind of come to be the expectation. But also want to kind of throw it to you, as it kind of expected, I thought Lily Meister came off and gave us some solid minutes on the bench.
Yeah, 100%. And I was just thinking that too, because she came in, she finished numbers wise 6 points and 7 rebounds. And I think she had at least 3 or 4 rebounds in the first few minutes of playing. So I've come to expect her to be a really strong influence in that aspect of the game particularly. And we saw even towards the end of the game in the second half, when things were not going Indiana's way, that she kept fighting for, there was one rebound that she didn't make the initial shot and then kept going back for that and eventually did make it. And so she has become, throughout the season, someone that Indiana has clearly been able to rely on a lot, especially when Mackenzie is not playing up to her typical level.
Yeah, and so kudos to Lily there. I think one thing as well, do you have anything else as expected? Because when we have a collapse like we did in the second half, I'm not sure there's much we can say went as expected.
I will say, I'll add on talking about Sarah just for a little bit, because she was 4 for 8 from 3, and she has played really, really well in the past 2 games. Whether or not that's because they're in Minneapolis and she has a bunch of family and friends in front of her, who knows? But I've been really impressed with her the last few games. And so I feel like maybe that this is the time for her to step up even more, and she thrives in these really competitive environments.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I thought Sarah really got us. I mean, a lot of that first half, that lead at halftime was really provided by Sarah Scalia, because she got hot in that last 5-6 minutes of the second quarter. Otherwise, we're probably not up 20 at the half. So kudos to Sarah, as you brought out. That's a good point. So let's move on to surprises. And I think obviously we're all going to sit here and be like, the biggest surprise of all is that this team blew a 20-plus point lead in the second half.
Yeah, I was sitting there towards the end and I just had no words. All of my family was texting me. My friends were texting me. I was like, I don't know what's happening either. I can't tell you. This is as much a surprise to me as it is to anybody else.
Yeah. And with that, I think that one of the things that we talked about and we've seen in the Workaholics a little bit, just the surprise at how much they struggled with, and they didn't seem to make any adjustments, at least what I could see on the TV. And again, I didn't think the TV angle was great. I would like to see a little wider angle so we could see how they were setting up, but they kept kind of throwing it to the corner or near the baseline. Well, that's the worst place you can throw it against the pressure like that. And so either set some screens or spread the floor out so you can kind of throw it over the top, because Ohio State was face guarding the guards. And so throw it over the top and look that way. But I just think probably the biggest surprise was, like you talked about already, we just look like, I don't want to say bad, but or a not legit team that should be a number one seed. But on this day in the second half, this was as bad as we've seen this team play in the last 2-3 years.
100%. It was not. I don't think there's even the most comparable thing for this season, at least, is the first quarter from yesterday's game. And other than that, there's nothing that I can remember that they've looked like this. And one thing that I did want to bring up, because this happened today and yesterday, is the offensive rebounds.
Yes.
Because when looking at the numbers, I guess, so Ohio State finished with 13 and Indiana ended up with 11. But for the majority of the game, Indiana had like 3 or 4, I think. And I think they're allowing far too many second chances and second chance points to the teams that they're playing. And that's consistently dangerous just throughout, in any game you play, especially as you go through the NCAA tournament. And that is something that I think they really can't afford to do. And they didn't struggle with that until yesterday and today from what I've largely been able to see.
Yeah. And the other I'll go to a surprise here is that, even though Ohio State made that run in the second half, they still really didn't shoot the ball that well. They only shot 42% in the second half. You would have thought for a run like that they would have been shooting like 60, 70%. So looking at it now, they were 18 of 19 at the line. They took advantage of everything they had to. They got the turnovers, they got the free throws and everything going down. And they were 23 of 25 at the line for the game. So, but I think one other surprise here was, and I think this is something we also talked a little bit about yesterday, and maybe it's something we've probably been looking at, kind of overlooking as we go through. This team has to stop fouling. The surprise here yesterday, surprise today, how much foul trouble we were in. McKenzie especially, but even Lily was picking up fouls yesterday. Yarden ends up fouling out today. We had a couple of people foul out yesterday, including Mac. You can't send teams to the line as much as we have over the last couple of days. And to me, that's a huge surprise.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you on that one, because it's in the regular season, I feel like Lily and Yarden were the ones that were picking up the most fouls in the games, and not necessarily like Yarden fouling out 2 games in a row is not as expected. Like, that's a surprise to me, but to have players like Chloe and you touched on Mackenzie getting up there in foul trouble, sometimes really early on in the game when you can't afford to be doing that is, again, just something that can't be happening in March. And that's just that's the bottom line.
No, I totally agree with that as well. So do you have any other surprises you want to mention here in this segment?
Ooh,
I mean, there are a lot, but I think we can keep talking about the surprises for a long time.
I'll say one more. I've got the numbers in front of me. Points in the paint, Indiana had 26 and Maryland had 40. And again, that just kind of goes back to Mackenzie, who was limited the entire game, 3 for 7, and then 6 for 7 from the free throw line. But she finished with 12 points. And I hate to say that Indiana needs Mackenzie Holmes to do everything for them, because clearly they don't. But you could feel what was missing today. And they need to figure something out, whether she's having injury problems with her knee or if it was just an off game or if Ohio State was able to really lock her down. But that's not something needs to change pretty quickly. They're not going to be able to make it very far if Mackenzie isn't even hitting 15 points, which, not to take away from the other players on the team who can score in double figures, but we all know how Mackenzie plays and how much she can impact a game.
Yeah, and I think this is first of all, talking about this kind of to help us go inside the numbers. I think it's the first time all year that Mackenzie hasn't shot above 50% in the game. Period. I mean, she's been shooting almost 70% for the year anyway.
9%,
every game before this, she had been above 50%, field goal shooting. And so let's talk a little bit about Mackenzie here. I thought she looked very limited. I thought she didn't look like she was moving very well. I don't know what exactly it is that she went into the locker room at one point there in the first quarter, and she was wearing a little bit of a different brace today. So plus out of this, and I'm not sure there are big pluses, is you get 2 weeks now before you're going to play again. And
exactly.
if it's something that's a bruise, if it's something of a little bit of there's just some tenderness, then you're going to be a chance to rest that, and hopefully that'll get healed up. But I agree with you. And I thought Ohio State did a good job of defending her. I thought they did a nice job. What we used to refer to, I did coaching-wise, shading. They were fronting the post, so you couldn't just pass it right in. You were going to have to lob it over, and that got us at the end. Chloe really tried to force the pass in at the end when we were down 2, and it got tipped out of bounds, and we ended up not really getting anything out of the out of bounds play. And then they were shading with somebody on the backside. So even if you did get a perfect lob in there, there was going to be somebody right there on the catch. So I thought Ohio, so kudos to them for changing up their defensive game plan. And they talked a little bit about it on the broadcast. What you got to do there is reverse it quickly to their side and let her seal and then flash back and from that. But I agree. The Mackenzie Holmes we saw today was not the Mackenzie Holmes we'd seen all year, but that's just shows how valuable she really is to this group.
Exactly. And it was hard to tell from the TV cameras and the angles once again, because I would have loved to just have my eyes on Mackenzie up and down the court the entire way just to see, because I would think she would limp and then the cameras would switch. And so I couldn't really figure it out. But seeing that she went back to the locker room after the first quarter is not a great sign, even if it's a minor thing. And playing the thing that it is very good that they have 2 weeks off. I think that's very, very good for her and recovery and for everybody else. But if this is something that came up because they're playing back-to-back games, 2 days in a row, that's not great in terms, I don't know, even if it's just a little bruise, it's still not a good sign, because you don't have a lot of turnaround time in the NCAA tournament either. It's not necessarily like you're going to be playing 2 days in a row, but even still, if you can't recover in 24, 48 hours from something, that is a big concern going forward still.
Yeah. So you got any team stats you want to mention here? We've mentioned a couple. So if we've talked about all the ones you had, go ahead. That'll be fine. But if you got any others, bring them up here.
We touched on turnovers. I think that was the other big thing. And then on the flip side, I'll say that, Ohio State's 14 steals to Indiana's 3 is just the defense has not been up to par in either of the last 2 games that they've played. And that's just a number that I think really kind of puts that into perspective.
Yeah, you gave up 53 in the second half today.
Yeah, that's
yeah. And I tweeted at halftime. I everybody was, there were some people on Twitter kind of like, well, we're rolling the number 14 ranked team. I'm like, this Ohio State team was 1 for 13 in this first half from 3, and they had a couple. They had some open looks that didn't go. And I tweeted it out at halftime off the account on the Doing the Work account that keep an eye on that, because they can get hot, and that will change the momentum if we don't make an adjustment on that. And I think they hit 3 of their first 4. Next thing you knew, it really seemed like they had them. And then they were able to. Then they brought the press. They and that was the key. They could make shots and put the press on that they didn't do a ton of in the first half because they weren't making shots. At one point they missed 13 straight shots. They started out 5 for 7. In the first quarter, and I even tweeted out that I didn't think the defense was solid there because we were giving up way too easy layups, and then we forced them into 13 straight misses, and everything looked better. But they are capable. This is, like you mentioned, this is a team that was as high as number 2 and suffered with J.C. Sheldon being healthy for most of the year, and I thought she played well today. Yeah, and then also the green girl, I can't think of her first name, that's been out all year with a knee injury again. I mean, this is a young woman that missed all of last year as well. So they were doing that, and they kind of went through that crisis of confidence after they lost to Iowa. So sometimes you just got to get kind of got to get straightened out and figure some things out. But I do want to point out a couple more as well. And you mentioned it about the turnovers. But we got beat on every basically statistical category, which doesn't surprise you. But when you only lose by 4, it is a little surprising that they outscored us 21-10 off turnovers, 20-10 on second chance points, and as you mentioned earlier, 40-26 in the paint. And that's just not what we think of with IU basketball. Yeah. And so, what about some of the individuals?
Let me see.
It'll be hard to find a lot of positives.
Yeah. Positive wise, touched on Sarah, Grace's overall stat line. Sydney hit a couple threes that were good, and she was, in the opportunities that she had, I thought that she was pretty good once again, kind of a bounce back game for her. But other than that, it's really hard to, and Lily, of course, but it's hard to just look at positives in a game that ended like this one did.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I will say I was a little surprised, and I thought the press had a lot to do with this, but I would have liked to seen us maybe do a couple things more for Sarah in the second half, especially when they started making the run, because she had been hot in the first half. And we've said this all season long, that Sarah Scalia is a streaky shooter. And right now she seems to be starting to come around into one of those streaks where she can almost carry you for a week to 2 weeks. And that's what you wanted in NCAA tournament time. Somebody who
Yeah.
gets hot for 2 weeks is going to take you a long way. But but again, I think the press did have a lot with that. I don't think it was necessarily so much scheme as we just got so frazzled by the press. I think we really lost a lot of what we wanted to do on the offensive end. I will point out Yarden Garzon also with 11 rebounds. She
That's
led
true.
the team.
Yep.
She had 11 rebounds. She also had 2 blocks and 3 assists. So I thought Yarden played pretty decently for a freshman. I don't expect her to carry us. I don't expect her to be the one to right the ship in that second half when things started going against us. That's where your veterans have to. That's where a little bit, Sydney and Chloe especially, I think, got to step up a little more. And because Grace even, had 2 turnovers, but Chloe Moore McNeil had 4 turnovers. That's almost unheard of from her. And then like 3 of them, I think, were on 3 straight possessions or 3 or 4 possessions.
Yeah, it was once again just going back to the press, but they didn't have a person in the point guard position who could effectively break it. And I don't know who could do that. I don't know what, like, I'm not like a coach. I have not played basketball, so I don't know what goes into that, but it was clear that they just didn't really know how to handle it, and nobody could.
Yeah, and that's the one thing where not having somebody like Nicole Cardano-Hillary, and we've been able to get past it really this year. But what we used to refer to as kind of the one-person press break.
Yeah.
Just get it into your point guard, get it into your fastest guard with handles so you can get it. And that might have been where Chloe could have maybe had a little bit of opportunity. But once Ohio State picked up that intensity and just kept going, and let's face it, I'm not going to blame this on the officials. The officials don't cause a 23, 24-point collapse. But the officiating did allow them to be aggressive. And I thought that played a role in it. But you got to adjust to that from the press break standpoint. So other than that, did you have anybody else individually you wanted to talk about?
No, I really don't think so. I think we've hit on everybody.
I will say this, and you brought it up. The theory girl for Ohio State had 8 offensive rebounds.
She was phenomenal.
She was
so good.
Luckily for us, she only shot like 7 for 15 off of those 8 offensive rebounds. But just that's a concern. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit later in one of our later segments as well. So we'll move on toward our game balls and hustle award. All right, Amanda, we're going to move on to game balls or who gets the game ball for you today. I'll let you go first.
Okay.
I know it's hard with this game, but we do
think.
pick out a game ball every game.
Yes. I think I'm going to have to go. I was trying to think about this before I came on because I knew that I would have to make a decision. I'm going to go with Sarah, kind of a combination of this game and last game in a way, just because it's March and it's the tournament, but because I was really, really impressed with her, especially today, going 4 for 8, 15 points, looked very composed from beyond the arc. And like you said earlier, I wish that she had gotten a little bit more opportunity in that second half, because I think Indiana really could have benefited from her shooting, especially from 3-point range. And I think just the way that she came in the first half was the way that she needs to come in every game. And that would have been one of the stories if Indiana had been able to win.
Yeah, I think I'm going to agree with you. I was kind of going back and forth between her and Grace.
Yeah.
And Grace Berger had 20 points, 4 rebounds, 6 assists. But I really think if we'd won this game, we would have really been talking a little bit more, especially if it would have continued from the first half on. I think we would have really been talking about the input that Sarah Scalia had in this. So I'm going to agree with you. And Sarah Scalia is going to get the game ball here. And I forgot to put the scroll up, but that is going to give her second game ball of the year for this as well. So congratulations to Sarah. And again, I thought, helped him. Maybe we need to find a way to play a few more games at the Target Center for Sarah, but not the rest of the team as well. So let's move on. Let's go to our Hustle Award. And Amanda, I'll let you go first. For those who are watching our live YouTube feed, you can see the scroll so far of winners scrolling across. But I'll let you go first.
Okay, this one's hard too, because I'm in between 2 players, but I think, and I talked about her earlier, I think I'm going to have to go with Lily Meister because of the way that she came in, and she played 9 minutes, and she had 6 points, 7 rebounds, and 5 of them were offensive rebounds. She did have 4 fouls, and that we talked about that being an issue, but she's a freshman, and to come in, especially in a game like this one, in the second half of a Big Ten tournament semifinal, and not be afraid to fight underneath the basket and go for rebounds and go for hard points and hard scoring is really impressive to me. And once again, I think that if Indiana had a better result, that would have been something that I would have definitely written about or touched on or asked about in the post-game press conference, because she was able to make such a big impact in the short amount of time that she played.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Lily Meister. That's who I had picked out kind of down toward the end of the game anyway. So I was going to go with Lily Meister. And I know it's a flawed stat, but she was +3.
Yeah.
in a game where it really got very ugly in the second half, Lily at least was a positive contribution on the floor. Like you said, 5 offensive rebounds and 2 block shots. So I thought Lily did exactly what was expected of her earlier. You know, we talked about expectations earlier, and I thought she did what she was expecting. Another kid who went home. She's from Minnesota, had a chance to play in front of friends and family and such. So that was, I thought Lily played well, and I think she has a bright future. We've talked about her a couple different times on the show throughout the year, even with you here, that just, what you see is kind of, some of our workaholics sometimes refer to almost as baby Mac, that you allow her to get in the weight room a little bit. You allow her to keep getting continued work against a quality player like Mackenzie Holmes and the coaching staff working her out. She has a very, in my opinion, that all their freshmen have really bright futures, but I think you really can see Lily be that next really good post player that can kind of follow in the mold of an Amanda Cahill, an Alexa Golbe, a Mackenzie Holmes. So I think, I really have some high hopes for her going forward. Anything else you want to add in about the Hustle Award or the game ball real quick, Amanda?
I don't think so. I think I've hit on everything I wanted to say.
All right. So congratulations to Lily Meister. That's her 3.5 now Hustle Awards for Lily on the season. And so let's move on to lingering questions. And I'm going to start this one out, Amanda, and I'm going to talk about it, but also kind of posing it as a question to you. I think obviously now the one big question we have is the health of Mackenzie Holmes. It was yesterday we thought maybe, banged a knee, maybe fell. Wasn't quite sure exactly, but she looked like she had, was a little tender, but we didn't feel like she was limping, didn't really see much limited movement. Today, when I saw her, and I agree with you, a lot of times we didn't get the best camera angle or the camera didn't stay with her, but it was almost like she had to take a little skip to get going. There was a little bit of a hitch. I call it a hitch in the step and such. So, and I know you weren't in the press conference today or anything, but I'm sure you'll have an opportunity this week to talk with Coach Moore and some press availabilities. But what if Mac is limited, and hopefully she isn't, but if she becomes a somewhat limited in the NCAA tournament, what do you think that means for this team going forward?
That's a good question. I think the one positive that is, if she is limited severely to the extent that we saw today, is that Indiana has 2 weeks to figure out how to play around her, where they can take as much advantage as they can of whatever she can do, however much that is. So I think that is the one thing that would give me hope, that if I were to find out that she had an actual issue, is that they have time to adjust. And when they have when they have more than just like, I don't know, a timeout in a game, because clearly they didn't do well at adjusting today. But if they have enough time to go in and practice and get the work in, I think they can adjust to that. And that I would be concerned, definitely, because you're taking away the top scorer, you're taking away the top rebounder. I think she's a top rebounder. She's up there if she's not the top.
A National Player of the Year candidate.
Exactly. You're taking away the best player on the team, and you can't just completely ignore that. But that's not an end all be all for this team, because they're good with her and they're good without her. They're better with her, but they're good without her. And I don't want to jump too far and say like, oh my God, she's hurt. They're going to this is awful. She might be fine in 2 days. We don't know. But it would be a problem, but it would not be if they were to make it, or when they play in the NCAA tournament. I don't think that would be the end all be all if they lose a game, is not just because Mackenzie Holmes is not at her peak performing ability.
Yeah, I think the other thing too here, as you mentioned, that was also maybe one of the things we didn't talk about much in the surprise, is just that, and I'm sure they were trying. I highly doubt. I mean, there were a couple times in my coaching career over 20 years where it kind of was like, all right, you guys aren't listening. You aren't doing what I'm asking. I'm going to let you sink. You're either going to sink or swim on your own. And they sank today. I have a hard time believing Terry Morin did that today in a Big Ten tournament game. I would see that much more possibly in a regular season game that wouldn't have had as much meaning as this did. But one of the things we've talked about time after time after time is the adjustments that this staff has been able to make at timeouts and especially at halftime. Now, again, Ohio State didn't show the press in the first half. I don't know whether that was by design or whether they just weren't hitting enough shots consistently. But it shouldn't have been a huge surprise that Ohio State could press you. So I was really surprised by the lack of an adjustment there by the team, by the staff. And maybe the staff was, and the players didn't execute it, or they couldn't they lost it because they got so frazzled. I don't know. But that was definitely one of the surprises with that. But I think you bring up a good point. I'll kind of follow that up and push it back to you. If she is able to get back and healthy, that's obviously a positive. But if she ends up being the Mackenzie Holmes we saw today, then it probably means a little bit bigger role for a player like Lily Meister, doesn't it?
I would expect so. Yeah, I would think. I was kind of surprised we didn't see Alyssa Geary come in today because she did yesterday, and so I would expect that we'll see more from Lily. We'll see more from Alyssa because Alyssa is, even though she transferred in this year, she's an experienced player. She has an increased level of maturity that I think they can take advantage of, and so, but especially for Lily, I think we'd be guaranteed to see more minutes from her.
Yeah, and I think the other thing about Geary is, like you mentioned, a veteran presence. She's been around, and with that, and also I think, not saying it'll be easy, but playing at home in the first two rounds of the NCAA tournament, you might be able to get even Mac even if Mac's at 90%, you're probably going to be able to get through those two games. So you almost really could think of it as like a 3 weeks. If you can get her, if she's healthy enough by the time you get to the regional, then that to me becomes probably the big point that everybody's going to be looking for. So, but I've kind of gone with the lingering question here. You got anything that's a lingering question for you?
I mean, this is a very broad question, but just what happened is the only thing that I like. That's the biggest thing because it's just so uncharacteristic. And that's the concern that I have is like, why couldn't they adjust out of halftime? Was it because the players just couldn't kind of get it into their heads, or was it because they truly couldn't figure out how to deal with Ohio State? And so it's kind of just like the big overarching question of why. And that's all you can have after a loss like this, I think. And there's no answer for it. They don't have an answer. No one's going to have an answer. That's just how it works. But because so many things, it just, they didn't play like they have all season. And so I kind of wonder if, because, in the two games that they've played in March, they haven't played well on the large part. They've struggled. And so is that because it's in the postseason and because they're feeling this pressure all of a sudden that maybe they weren't feeling before? Is it getting into their heads more than it did before? Because Terry Moore talked yesterday that they had to adjust their mentality and not the schemes in the game yesterday against Michigan State. So is that a sign that maybe they're getting a little bit more, I don't know if they're like more nervous about the games that they're playing, or they're just thinking about it more than they did before? It's kind of the biggest thing for me because talent-wise, it's not like things have gone away. Unless Mackenzie Holmes is injured, it's not like they've all just lost their ability to play good basketball. So there's something else that's influencing that. And that's my question as to what is that and how do they fix it?
And does it carry over? I think
Exactly.
That's also the kind of that's also kind of the second part of your question here is, does it carry over?
Yeah.
And I think Sellersburg Flash and the Workaholics brings up a good point that I hadn't really given thought to, but he brings up. It was almost like I thought yesterday in the first half, they had a little bit of the deer in the headlight look. They just were like, they got hit by Michigan State. And it was like, ooh, we didn't expect this. Whereas I especially thought maybe in the second half today, he's right, where he says they were playing not to lose. They got to the point where they played not to lose and instead of playing to win. And I know that's cliche, but there is something to that. And oftentimes when you start playing not to lose, when you're just trying to hold on, is when you end up losing. And I think that's a big one as well. I'd like to think that it won't linger with this team, but I did mention this the last couple of weeks that this team used to being the hunter, and now they have become the hunted. And there is a different mindset that you're going to have when you are in that position. And I think and that goes back to the question you were raising. And we won't really know the answer until we get to the NCAA tournament to see how they do with that. So one other lingering question I have here is, and I hate to say again, it sounds like we're nitpicking on a team is 27-3.
Yeah.
But they didn't play well today. They didn't play really well yesterday. They got out of Dodge yesterday really kind of by the skin of their teeth. And we thought they were going to roll today, and then it just all collapsed. Can they stop fouling? I mean, they had 22 fouls today. I don't remember exactly how many yesterday. You got to find a way to get back to playing defense without fouling as much as they are.
Yeah, I remember looking yesterday, and I don't know what the final number was, but at one point they had 26 fouls because so did Michigan State. And I was like, how do you call so many fouls in a game? But their defense has, I don't want to say fallen off because obviously it's not just gone, but that is a question for me too, is will they get back to that defense that was only allowing 60, maybe 70 something points instead of getting up in the 80s and whatever. Because that you can't do that in NCAA tournament time, no matter who you play and no matter where you are.
Yeah. They gave up 86, 87 at Iowa, 85 yesterday, and ended up 79 today. I mean, so they're averaging now their last 3 days. They're giving up but they're in the low 80s, which is not where this defense had been as well. So I don't have any other lingering questions here. We're going to kind of wrap this up, but normally at this point we preview our next opponent.
Well,
but we don't know who that's going to be yet because we're still a week plus out from the NCAA bracket reveal, which will be next Sunday, not tomorrow, but next Sunday. I believe that's on ESPN. I don't have the time on that, but it's sometime in the evening, like 7:00 Eastern, 8:00 Eastern. And then we may do something where we have a in the community, have a happy hour where we can get together and kind of watch the reveal or at least talk about the reveal a little bit. And then along with Assembly Call, we'll probably we haven't totally firmed this up, but we'll probably do something with Assembly Call like we did last year, where we have kind of a men's and women's bracketology type show where we go through the bracket and pick our winners and losers and how we think it'll play out. So we don't have an opponent to talk about at this point. You can also check out our Twitter feed. If you search Doing the Work on Twitter, you'll find us there. And it's Doing the Work. I also want to mention that on Twitter, especially, we've been updating IU alums playing overseas, especially in Europe. Well, the only ones I know of are in Europe. Amanda Cahill's in Luxembourg. Jory Davis is in Italy. Tyra Buss Davison is in Lithuania, and then Nikki Cardano Hillary and Alexa Goldberg are both playing in Spain. Assembly Call will be on. Oh, excuse me, I forgot to mention. Besides on Twitter, you can also check out our Assembly Call community page. And right now, I believe we're still offering a free trial period on that. So if you go to join.assemblycall.com, you can join for free for the trial period as well. Speaking of Assembly Call, they will be on tomorrow after the Michigan game with their post-game show. That game tips at 4:30 Eastern, 3:30 Central. It won't be on right after. They're going to wait for the senior speeches to conclude and stuff. So that Assembly Call will be on a little bit later than normal tomorrow, but you can catch them after the game and after the senior speeches. Also, be sure to catch and subscribe to the next episode of Crimson Cast, part of our Back Home Network. And Amanda has a women's basketball podcast there with Crimson Cast, so catch her podcast about the women's basketball there. And our next show, well, we don't know yet. Our next show will be sometime in 2 weeks on a Thursday or a Friday, I think it'll be, when the IU women will open up tournament play in Bloomington. That was one of the things I saw in the Workaholics here, man. I want to get your opinion on this real quick before I throw it to you for last call. I really don't think this is going to take us out of a one line. I think it may drop us down a spot or two, but I don't think we have any danger of falling out because both Utah, Stanford lost. I'm not sure LSU has the resume. So I'm not sure it totally drops us out of one line, but it may drop us down to that 3rd or 4th overall seed.
Yeah, I think I saw a tweet from Charlie Cream kind of right after the game ended saying that Indiana is still a 1 seed. There are too many other things that would have that happen that would keep them as a 1 seed despite that loss. I could see dropping down maybe, like you said, in the overall seeding, but that would be the only thing. And I don't think that's not really that big of a deal if you think about it.
Just in my opinion, if you just want to be that number 4 overall seed, because I think you want to try and avoid South Carolina for as long as you can. If you play out to where the seeding is supposed to be, you'd like to see if you're the number 2 or number 3 overall seed, doesn't really make any difference because you're going to be in that opposite bracket from South Carolina, which I think is where you want to be if you can get to the Final Four. So and then because you just want to feel like that one game is what you got with that. So we're going to throw it over to Amanda for her last call and find out what she's got to think about today's game, which I think we talked about, but what she thinks about going forward too for this IU women's team.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, obviously, it's a really brutal loss. It's a heartbreaking loss for them. No one is happy in that locker room by any means. No fans are happy. Nobody who watches Indiana basketball is happy. But the thing that this team that I have absolute faith in is that they're going to use it as motivation and nothing else. They're not going to look back and be super mad at themselves or get in their heads about it. I think they're going to do a really good job of learning from it and learning from the game yesterday and just the last stretch of play here. And I think they're going to be able to take it and make some sort of good adjustment from it, because that's what they've been doing all year. And that's the mentality of the team. That's the personality that they have. So I think that would be the biggest thing that I would want to take away in some sort of positive light, is that this is only going to fuel them further to come out in the NCAA tournament and prove that the second half that they played today was not the actual team that they are.
Yeah, and I'll follow up with that. I'll say kudos. I think Amanda hits a really nail on the head here, because I think and again, I don't want to make it sound like I'm happy about a loss. I'm not, especially with the way they lost. If that had been a 79-75 game that had been a nip and tuck game all the way in, we'd be like, hey, Ohio State played well, give them credit. We were up 23. That's why it's such a hard loss to really accept. But sometimes you got to hit a little bit of a rough patch. Now, this isn't the ideal time in the year to do it, but it's better than 2 weeks from now.
Yeah.
So, and to kind of your point, just let's get them fixed. Let's find out, let's get back into the film. Let's see what teams are doing. And because I'm sure there are going to be some other teams out there that we'll see in that first, second, the regional, who are going to be like, Ohio State gave them some trouble with that press. Let's see and especially if they're a team that presses anyway, or at least feels like they can press some. So get back in there, maybe take a few days off. You've got, get away from, I'm sure they'll watch film. The kids will work out, the players will work out on their own in Cook Hall, but just give them a couple, 3 days, get away from the floor. Just come back Tuesday or Wednesday and get after it and get on the floor again. We'll start doing some stuff and let's get this solved. Because right now I just think that they're, like you said, it's just, they just right now just aren't playing their best. That's the best way I can put it. So, yep. That's one of those. So, but I want to thank Amanda for being with us. And if you want to see us do the show live and be a part of the live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com Assembly Call. I'm trying to also do my production work here. You can be a part of our private community as well. And join, again, we have I believe still part of a 2-month trial free today at assemblycall.com/community. Special thanks to John Ringer of Rig Design for designing our new logos. Also, a big thank you to Bob Thompson for our new music that you heard throughout the broadcast. I want to thank Amanda from Inside the Hall and Crimson Cast for joining me today. Kathy had a previous engagement, couldn't be with us today. And she was, unfortunate for Kathy, she was actually going to make the trip to Minneapolis tomorrow. So I'm not sure what she's going to do tomorrow. But hopefully wherever Kathy is today, she's being safe in her travels. And we want to thank all of you for listening. We want to thank all of you and the workaholics who come here every post-game show and listen to us and help us spread the word about doing the work. And we'll be back to talk IU hoops again with you soon. Just follow the community, especially, or the Twitter feed. We'll keep you updated on our broadcast, but I do know it's going to be at least a week before we're back on it. Or who knows? We might decide to do something and get together and see it and talk a little bit about what we think the NCAA tournament will look like even before the bracket reveal. But that's not nearly as much fun. We don't know who exactly, I'm not a big bracketologist. I'm not a big, I think they're going here. We know they're going to be in Bloomington. Who's going to be here? So we'll see. But I want to thank everybody. Until then, keep your elbow in, your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers. All right. I'm going to have to get her pretty quick, but I'm going to have to let Kathy know she should have been here. This is one of those games where a third person should have had to feel the pain as well.
Yeah, honestly.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Now I got to go write an article about it too. So
good luck with that. And
thank you.
Try to, obviously you can't sugarcoat it to a certain degree. It's, you got to be as honest as you can about it, but I mean, my whole afternoon tomorrow was going to be basically planned around IU men and IU women, kind of going back and forth.
I was expecting to sit there and have the women on my computer at the men's game. So I guess that's one less thing for me to worry about tomorrow. But
and I was going to ask you when we finish this up, if you would have been available tomorrow, but because I wasn't sure what. Okay, so because
Yeah,
Kathy was going to go to the game, so
okay.
and plus we were kind of in that real. Jared kept trying to say he thought it would work out, but I was looking at the timing and I was like, man, I think we're both going to be right butting up against each other. About the time the women finish, it's probably about the time the senior speeches are going to finish. So
yeah,
I think we would have figured it out overnight, but anyway, hey, I want to thank you again for coming on, and we'll we'll get back in touch with you. Like I said, maybe we'll do something before, probably not this coming week, but maybe the week before that week of the tournament. Okay. Are you going to be able to track? Well, no, they're in Bloomington. I forgot about that. I keep
so I'll be here for that.
Yeah, so you'll be there for the games in Bloomington. So, all right, hey, have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, bye.